me make sure everything is on. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
That was an interesting introduction, Glinda. Talked about my dog. You talked about where I lived, what I worked. Well, I had her do that, by the way. So in 50 words or less, I was able to pack in or cram in about 5 things about myself that many of you guys put on your social media. Okay, so the point I'm trying to illustrate here is it's seemingly innocuous pieces of information that are sprinkled out through your social media can be collected, and as we'll see here in a minute, can be used against you. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today. Is I'm going to be preventing that victim mindset for cybercrime. Now, how do I do this here? Oh, here we go. So let's start off with an example. As you can see here on this slide, there's 2 different views. This is at DEF CON in Las Vegas. For those of you who don't know, DEF CON is a hacker conference hosted every year at Las Vegas. And what they have going on right now is a social engineering test. And so there is a person in a soundproof booth, and they're given a list of about 10 to 20 things, and they need to capture the flag. You have to check off those items that you've captured, such as, you know, you've got the Windows passwords, or you've got some sort of other piece of information that can identify and help target that victim. So what this person does is there's a booth there, and they go through, and I think part of that is illegal, just to make sure that, you know, nobody gets in too much trouble. And I want to highlight one example that happened a couple of years ago. A person was actually in this booth and captured all of the flags. And what he did is he posed as an executive from Walmart in Arkansas and called one of the branch offices or one of the Walmarts in a small town. So this person called up and said, hey, we've got this government grant. And he gave a lot of information about himself, about where he was from, all that public. So he sounded very authoritative. And this person on the other end of the line ended up giving him Windows passwords and credentials. This manager did. Shift times, stock items, and furthermore, for icing on the cake, he actually directed him to an outside website so he could enter all that information in himself. So the person in the booth didn't have to do it. So within 20 minutes, this person has completely scammed and conned this Walmart, this person from Walmart, and gathered all that. When he got out of the booth, he was met with applause and a lot of laughter and stuff like that. So all of that can be done without a computer. This person basically didn't have a computer. He just read from a script. With that being said, these are the top fraud cases so far from 2017 to now. And all of these things have something in common, a common denominator. So the tech support fraud, for those of you who don't know, is basically somebody posing as tech support trying to get into your computer. This happens a lot. You'll see a pop-up and says, hey, your computer's infected. Please call support line and they'll come and get in. Elder fraud is a big one. I'm actually on an elder fraud or elder justice council for St. Clair County because, as you'll see a little bit later, elder fraud is big business for fraudsters. And then extortion like malware, ransomware. All of these have a social component to them, a social engineering component, I should say. So the FBI just released the Internet Crime Complaint Center, or IC3 report for 2017. Very serendipitous. It just happened a few weeks ago before this presentation. I want to highlight the top 3 items here. So the top 3 scams actually constitute about $1 billion worth of loss just within the United States. And what we'll see here, the BEC, EAC, that's just basically business email fraud. Okay, so that can range from phishing to actual other technical payloads. But all of these, the romance fraud, the non-delivery, which is sort of like a refund fraud, all of that is done through a social aspect and not technical, like most people think. So they're not actually penetrating firewalls and stuff like that. They're actually attacking the human. I thought this was very interesting, so I wanted to share with you. At first glance, I looked at this and I thought, okay, the total loss must be indicative of how many people actually got scammed. But I looked over and saw the total count of people. The total count is actually pretty evenly distributed as far as the age groups, which was actually surprising. I guess it just so happens that our older generation has more money to lose, unfortunately. So some questions to ask yourself about your data. Number one, am I actually required to secure my data? Where is my data, my protected data actually stored? You guys, can you point to it? And how is it being transmitted? Well, to ask those questions means that you have to be a proper custodian of that data. So if you are in the financial sector, if you're in healthcare, or if you're in manufacturing and you have a process of your own, intellectual property, you want to make sure that you protect that data. So most people can say, yeah, I point to the server in a closet. That's where my data sits. But I'm here to tell you that a lot of times your data is actually being transmitted and it can be captured through your email. So last year a report came out that said of the top Fortune 500 companies, most of their data can actually be scraped off from email. About 60% of their, what they call their file drive space from their company can be scraped off through email. And the reason that is because a lot of people share inter-office email and they have one or two things that they may share, right? It may be a co-work or a new hire's employment record. It may be some other piece of identifying information, and they don't realize that all that data actually sits in your email. So you actually have to know what you're dealing with and where it is. Because if you actually map it out, I think you'll be surprised. So let's talk about the tactics people use, these social engineers use. Number one, they want to appeal to authority and attempt to inspire that trust. We saw that with the first example, the Walmart example. He called in posing as somebody coming from headquarters. But when he did that and he said the right things, this person thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to win a government grant. I need to help out. It'll make me look good. And so he gave him everything that he wanted. Second, this is more of a psychological trick, and that's getting us to agree to something small, seemingly not unreasonable. We see that a lot with some sales tactics, maybe through, I was reading a book about Amway and their sales tactics, leaving a box there for you to try. It's not unreasonable. And then flattery, obviously. We saw the second one there being romance scam. If you can give somebody some flattery, they're going to keep coming back to that well, for sure. So a couple more examples about exploiting the actual human weakness here. In 2007, an unknown person, still out on the lam with $27 million, in diamonds from a European bank, got in just using his charm, and that was the exact words from the report that I read. So what does this charm mean? Basically, he was able to infiltrate that bank, an actual physical bank, just by doing a little bit of recon and posing as somebody from with authority. And so they actually he not only stole that those diamonds and jewels, but they actually helped him carry it out. Now, furthermore, this just recently happened a few years ago. The Associated Press Twitter feed got hacked. You guys may be aware of that. Well, this was a phishing email to all the Associated Press employees. Now, a few of them, a handful of them, actually clicked on the link. What had happened was, hey, you need to reset your password. It was one of those phishing emails. They clicked on the link, went to a site, they captured their credentials. Well, the people that got the credentials went in and sent a tweet and said, hey, 2 explosions happened in the White House. President Obama might be injured. And instantly, the Dow drops on that bogus story. Real-world social engineering can have real-world consequences, and big consequences. Now, it's not just social engineering, it's also computer weaknesses that can be exploited. So I'd be remiss if I didn't go through a few of these. Unpatched computers, absolutely. Unpatched means if you're not doing Windows updates, third-party updates. Open networks, wired or wireless. We all know about wireless networks. I don't think you want to connect anything open on your wireless network. But wired is something a lot of people don't think about. If you own a business, a physical brick and mortar business, and somebody comes into the lobby, can they just plug into your network? Are all the jacks energized? Excuse me. Open firewall ports, this is pretty self-explanatory. If your firewall is open, even for a legitimate business need, you need to make sure that it's secured and patched. Physical computer position. This is very interesting because there's quite a few YouTube videos. I encourage you to go out there and take a look. What I know from experience, like if you get physical access to a computer, whether that be point of sale or otherwise, I've got a little device actually in my bag. You guys can come by and see it sometime. It's called a rubber ducky. And it actually looks like a USB thumb drive. And it's programmed where if I put it into a machine, I can get access to it in about a minute. Remote access to it. And then finally, lack of encryption. This goes without saying. If you guys are transferring sensitive data, you need to make sure at this day and age that you have proper encryption. And I would even go further and say you need to have proper encryption if you're in the banking, financial, legal, or healthcare industries as well. So what can we do? Well, some preventative measures. First and foremost, you got to know what it is you have to secure. We talked about this. Where's your data? Where does it live? Is it on thumb drives? Is it in your email? Is it potentially being transmitted outside of your organization that you don't know of? Even backups. You got to make sure that those, if they're being transmitted outside of your organization, that they're encrypted and secured. You got to employ strict policies and protocols on dealing with secure requests. This means simply that if you have a receptionist, if you have some other employees that are taking calls from the outside, that they understand that they can't answer everything. And if somebody gets too inquisitive, they need to be able to hang up the phone and call them back. We employ this at Alliance. If somebody needs their password changed, we say, okay, we're going to contact you. We hang up the phone and we call them back, okay, to make sure that that number is not being spoofed by somebody. So train your employees as well. This means security awareness training. What are some of the things to look out for as far as malware, phishing? Do phishing campaigns. You can run these actually through a reputable company. They'll send out bogus phishing emails and see how many people actually clicked on the links. And then you can train beyond that. And then computer infrastructure best practices. This goes without saying. You know, you want to position your computers correctly. You want to make sure that nobody can walk in and just plug into your network. You need to make sure everything's patched. And then finally, continuous education. And I would encourage all of you to go out and ensure that you've got, you're on mailing lists for at least a couple of different sources where you can get up-to-date information about what's actually going on out there. What are the top fraud cases going on? They're typically all variants of the core fraud. However, there are some exploits out there that come about on a pretty much a weekly basis. I get those sent directly to my phone. I would encourage you guys to go out there and sign up for those alerts. I know the FBI and CERT actually has some good resources. And so finally, I'll leave you with this statistic, this slide. Over the past 5 years, guys, the trend has been like this. I don't see it going down anytime soon, okay? With 1.2 or 1.42 billion last year, I can only see it going a little bit higher. So I would leave you with asking you, how are you guys going to protect yourself and your company from those malicious attacks, and how to prevent yourself from being a victim? Any questions?
So I got an email from a client a couple of months ago, and it was a link to a Box document or Dropbox, and it was actually from the CEO's administrative assistant. And I wasn't expecting it, so I replied back, said, is this from you? And I immediately got a reply saying yes. And then half an hour later, she called me and said, this wasn't me. And it came from her email address. I mean, how would that happen? Would you have any idea? Did someone like have their login credentials, and were they actually inside their email, or what? That was really scary to me.
Yeah, there's a couple of things you have to look out. This is very common. In fact, it happened to us internally. A couple things you have to look at is the email address actual header. Okay, the header is where you're going to get the information at. Okay, so a lot of times the name, the display name will come up as coming from that person, and they know who to target because they can get that information from the websites about who's there and what their role is, right? So they can sound legitimate, but typically it'll come from a spoofed email address, meaning one character may be off in the domain and it'll look really similar. So you have to look at the header and see if it actually is coming from that person. 9 times out of 10 it's not, and it's just made to look like it. So then the person that was sending it thinks that they've been hacked, and they spend a bunch of money trying to reconcile that. But there are cases where absolutely it's been hacked, especially if you're looking at like people using webmail. They'll get in through webmail, yeah.
So I replied back to that. First of all, I looked at the email address, and I don't know how to look at a header, but I looked at the address and not just the name. And replied back, and she got my email, the actual client. So it wasn't like it was going to somebody besides her. So
let's say that she needs to change her password. Yeah, in those cases, more than likely they have the password, or they actually have control of the computer and have sent it through their Outlook. They may not have the actual email password.
Jared, I can get a phone call from a cold client or a referral, and with my charm, I can typically get, by the end of the call, I'll sell them an audit or something like that, and I'll say, I'll need your Google ID and password. It's very common that they'll just tell me that over the phone, or they'll just follow up with an email and send that to me, which gives me access to their browser history, to their Gmail, to all kinds of stuff, right? For business owners, what is the proper way to convey your username and password to somebody in my position?
Yeah, we have a couple of different methods. For our customers, we like to also send usernames and passwords through a program called LastPass. It's easy for the end user to sign up because it's free, and we can actually share credentials that way. Okay, so that's one way. The other way is to, a lot of times whenever we get a ticket that will say, we need to change our username or password, or we need to set somebody up new, we can email the username, but we'll always text or we'll always call with the password. So it's almost a multi-factor type of situation. Yeah.
If you're working in a coffee shop and they do have a password-protected Wi-Fi, but it hasn't changed in 15 years, is it better to be using your own hotspot than it is to use any, even if it's a password-protected outside Wi-Fi?
Yeah, so this is near and dear to my heart. I would tell you that you should probably use your hotspot regardless. Even if it's password protected, these networks, I know that these networks, you can get on them, but you can see other people on the network, okay, if you know what you're doing. So it may be password protected, but there may be 50 people on that network. And furthermore, I have another device in my bag that will allow me to spoof that exact Wi-Fi SSID signal, okay? So it'll look like it's coming from the coffee shop, but it's called a man-in-the-middle attack. Everybody will get onto that network, and I'll be able to see all traffic. I think we got a time for one or two.
Don't go over there.
No.
So if you would like to depress us even further, you might want to mention, or maybe you could speak to the fact that so many children's identities are being compromised now. People think, well, why would they want a kid's ID? It's because nobody's tracking it, nobody's looking for it. And I have a video I'd be happy to send to anybody. It's Frank Abagnale's video, the guy that did Catch Me If You Can. You ever seen that movie? That's a great movie. And now he works for the FBI. And it's also very depressing. So I'd be happy to send it to anybody.
Yeah.
We could all be depressed.
Guys, thank you so much. I'll be around for questions.